Maier, would you state your full name and home address?
George T. Maier, 831 Oak Crest Lane, Northeast, Massillon, Ohio.
And you are presently, of course, what happens today or later report you're planning on being on the Democratic primary ballot this May for the public office of Stark County Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
And attendant with that, you have submitted a considerable quantity of documents to the Board of Elections for qualification purposes.
Yes, sir.
In fact, I think it was 244 pages exclusive of your petitions. Does that sound right to you?
I didn't count.
In your submission, you went back to your employment in the 1980s, did you not? Your submission to this board?
I did.
Why did you go back so far when the statute only requires 4 or 5 years?
I wanted to be all-inclusive.
And you included what I would characterize as attaboy certificates, Trooper of the Year, Certificate of Recognition. Why'd you do that?
I thought it was appropriate for the packet to include those accommodations and promotions that I've received in my law enforcement career.
Do they have any relevance under the revised code section that the Supreme Court addressed?
Not that I'm aware of.
But you put them in there anyway?
Yes, sir.
The exhibits that Sheriff Maier had, are they still in front of you, Mr. Maier? I think so. Exhibit B3, it looks like this, if you can grab it. The union contract in Harrison County.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to limit my questions to your second stint of employment down there after you were ousted by the Supreme Court. Did you join the union for that second stint?
I did not.
Why not?
I was never asked to.
Did you ever ask anybody if you should, or just waiting for the union to ask you? Is that what you mean?
I never asked anybody. I didn't really know who to ask.
Were you aware that it was a unionized position?
Yes, I was.
And you didn't ask anybody, what's my contract say, what's my rights, what's my duties? You didn't ask.
I did not.
Because you knew you weren't going to be there very long, isn't that why?
No, sir.
What time of day about did you find out the Supreme Court had ousted you?
In the morning hours?
Of November 6th?
Yes, sir.
And you immediately called Sheriff Maier down in Harrison County to tell him you needed a job?
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's a question.
No, I did not.
When did you call Mr. Maier, Sheriff Maier in Harrison County?
I believe I talked to him the next morning.
On the 7th?
Yes, sir.
And of course, you heard his testimony where he said the same thing, right?
I
He
did.
talked to you on the 7th. You heard his testimony a few minutes ago to that effect?
Yes, sir.
Well, he didn't seem to know why the candidate that looks like this, Mr. Maier, that tabbed the document, he didn't appear to know why Exhibit B of the candidate had the date 11/6/2013 3 times by 3 different people when he didn't talk to you until the next day. Do you know why?
I do not.
And how did you find out, I believe Harrison County Sheriff had testified because of oil and gas and more crime, he needed a deputy. Coincidentally, the day after you were ousted by the Supreme Court, how did you come to find out he needed a deputy?
I had conversed with Sheriff Maier throughout the year on operations within his agency. Obviously, operations within Stark County Sheriff's Office. We're both sheriffs. We compared notes on a professional and basis. And so I was somewhat aware of the situation down there.
And so, the day after the Supreme Court ousted you as a usurper from Mr. Swanson's position, your first thought was, I got to call my good friend in Harrison County and see if he'll give me a job?
No, sir.
Who else did you call to get a job, to get yourself qualified as you assert you are?
I didn't call anybody else.
You only called Sheriff Maier in Harrison County?
That's correct.
Why didn't you call somebody here in Stark County so you don't have to drive so far to go to Harrison County?
Objection sustained.
Why didn't you call anybody else? Why only him?
Objection.
It goes to credibility, it goes to the sham. Of course it's an appropriate question. Why didn't you call somebody besides Sheriff Maier in Harrison County to get a job, to get qualified? Why him? Only him?
Well, it's a pretty long question, but I called him because I knew of the situation down there. He was paying deputies overtime to cover shifts. They were short-handed, so that's why I called him. I had worked for him before. Earlier in the year, I was aware of their situation, so that's why I called him.
If you would look at Exhibit P1 that was presented to Sheriff Myers, looks like this.
Yes, sir.
He said this is the only application for employment you ever filled out. Does that sound right to you?
I filled out the application. And
I mean, in his county, of course, I'm sorry.
Well, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Sheriff Myers had just testified as to Exhibit P1 that this is the only application you had filled out.
I filled out this application and completed the background forms for Sheriff Myers' employment, yes.
I understand, but I'm asking about this form that says Harrison County Sheriff's Office application, Exhibit P1, and I understand the top part of it isn't part of the application. That's your ID badge. But Exhibit P1, this is the only application you ever filled out for employment in Harrison County.
Yes, sir.
And this was related, Exhibit P1 specifically was for the first time you were employed down there.
Yes, sir.
And the second time, after a telephone conversation on November 7, 2013 with Sheriff Myers, you didn't fill out a new application.
I did not.
And you've never joined the union.
I did not.
If you would look at Exhibit P2, looks like this, a bunch of flat redactions.
Yes, sir.
Any information on there look inaccurate to you? I mean, it's got your name on it, so
I'm not, this is the first day I've really seen this. I'm not sure. It's not a form that I've seen before, so it appears to be some type of internal record keeping, if you will, for the auditor's office.
well, I think I figured out that PPE means pay period ending, at least based upon Sheriff Myers' testimony about certain days that you worked. And it's got total fringes, a whole bunch of zeros. Did you not get any fringes?
I'm not sure what that column means. I did pay into PERS. I did pay all the required taxes, Medicare, and I was inclined to get health insurance as well, and I paid into that. So I believe I received all the benefits afforded to me with employment in Harrison County.
On P4, Mr. Chairman, does that sound right?
Is that P4? P5.
P5 would be next.
I believe so. Yeah, P5.
Mr. Maier, I've entered you what's been marked as P5. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Is that your home address at the top?
It is.
And is that your private email
It is.
as opposed to like a sheriff's email?
Yes, sir.
Who drafted this document? Who created it?
Objection. It says this document has no relevance whatsoever as to whether or not Sheriff Maier meets the obligations of B8 or B9 of the statute.
Mr. Conley, was you heard?
Well, I believe it does because, Mr. Chairman, the arguments that Mr. Rosenberg lost before the Supreme Court are set forth in the first line here, where the signatories refer to him as the most qualified person to serve. And according to my client's protest, be it right or be it wrong, it's the same issues that are involved in P5, the same issues that were before the Supreme Court, the same issues that are before you. And I don't know how you can say it's not relevant when you haven't even heard the questions I want to ask.
The issue is not whether he is the most qualified. That is not your determination to make. Your determination to make is whether he meets the statutory requirements to be on the ballot. That is the determination, whether he meets the requirements of what we call Section 8A, 9A, or 9B. It's not whether he's the most qualified. It's whether he meets that criteria. This document has no relevance to that issue.
Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, these are rather informal procedures. The rules of evidence do not apply to this administrative proceeding. If the chairman thinks I'm getting too overboard, you can stop. But in the meantime, this would be a very short period of inquiry.
Well, I'm going to tell you, we'll just tread carefully because I think, the document itself will be in evidence. It speaks for itself. I have you ask a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, after all that, Mr. Maier, I only have one question about P5.
Great.
Assuming you answer the other one, I'm not sure. Who drafted this?
I don't know.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm, Dimitri St. John, the board member sitting to the right there, he signed this? As far as you know?
Document speaks for itself.
Right.
But you don't know, I mean,
Well, when you
your
know-
objection is that, how does he know who signed it? I mean,
How does he know who signed it?
That's whose signature.
No relevance. Absolutely.
Russell Scanlon.
I've handed the witness what's been marked P6. You recognize this document?
Yes, sir.
Who drafted this document?
I didn't.
And I note at the bottom of the second page, it says, all materials printed in-house and paid for by Keep George Maier Sheriff Committee. Is that correct?
Objection.
Did I read that right?
Objection.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I just was asking if I read that objection. I was asking if I read the notation on the second page correctly. All materials printed in-house and paid for by Keep George Maier Sheriff Committee.
Objection. Objection, members. Again, this document has no relevance whatsoever as to whether or not, as the application date, George Maier meets the requirements of 8A, 9A, or 9B. Political documents are irrelevant to the issues that this board has to decide. And therefore, we should keep focused on the issues at hand and not get into this kind of superfluous stuff.
I will sustain that motion. Again, this particular document is going to be in evidence.
Excuse
Well,
me,
then,
was the ruling that it will or will not be done?
question.
quite understand that. Thank you.
I need to understand the chair's ruling. You will not permit me to ask Mr. Maier questions regarding this?
Based on his based on what he's indicated in defense of your question, I am sustaining his reasons for that. It's superfluous, you know. I mean, let's.
So
we do have to.
What's on the second page at the bottom? Because it's on there, is that what you mean, Mr. Chairman?
No, I mean, we're not going to get into a political debate. We're looking at qualifications for sheriff. That's what we're looking for.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to his objection, not that I'll necessarily change your mind, but if not, I'll proffer my questions for
All
the
right,
record.
that'd be great.
My question is, my intent is to concentrate. You say, Mr. Rosenberg said this letter didn't have anything to do with the statutory qualifications. That's not true. Mr. Maier himself says in this letter on the second page, this service will fulfill the technical statutory provision mentioned in the Supreme Court's opinion. Now, how you can say this letter didn't have anything to do with the issue before your board, I didn't write this, Mr. Maier did. Probably Mr. Rosenberg drafted it for him, and now he says, oh, God, they didn't have anything to do with this. That's absurd.
Well, your particular question with respect to who's paying for this, why don't you get to that issue?
Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Mr. Maier, P6, I believe you've answered, you've seen it before, you drafted it, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's undated, but is it fair to say this was distributed or delivered somehow to the DCC members before the first time the DCC appointed you?
No, sir.
Okay, so it would be before the second time you were appointed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't mean that as a trick question, I was just wrong. I apologize. And in this letter of P6 at the bottom of the first page, you say, to resolve this technicality, I've accepted the position I held prior to being appointed sheriff, where I am again serving as a full-time peace officer with the Harrison County Sheriff. And then you have it in bold print underlined, this service will fulfill the technical statutory provision mentioned in the Supreme Court's opinion. Did I read that right?
Yes, sir.
And so what was the purpose of you going to Harrison County the second time and getting a job as a deputy?
Well, the purpose was to fulfill a service for the sheriff that he needed. And consequently, I believed after researching and talking to my attorneys, that would also fulfill the requirement that was outlined by the Ohio Supreme Court in having boots on the ground service as Stark County Sheriff.
Was it the truth of the matter the reason you went down there and got employed on November 6th or November 7th or November 8th, whatever the heck date it was, you did so only so you could attempt to get yourself qualified? Isn't that why you took that job?
No, sir. Actually, I just told you the truth.
I'm sure you did. Okay. And somewhere up there, Mr. Maier, is your resignation letter that you had sent to Sheriff Myers. Trying to find the darn thing. Exhibit B3 looks like this. Did you write that?
I did.
Type it right? And that's your signature?
Yes, sir.
And when did you cause this Exhibit B3 to be delivered to Harrison County Sheriff?
Actually, I spoke to the sheriff on the phone the day that I had drafted the letter and told him I'd be sending the letter to him, delivering it to him, actually, because I had some things that I had to turn back in, my badge and my ID card. And I did that because the next day I was going to be filing my affidavit with work because my background and fingerprints had come back.
So you hand-delivered this Exhibit B3 on December 5th?
I think it was the next day. I don't recall for sure.
But you didn't mail it, fax it, or email it, you hand-delivered it probably on the 6th.
Correct.
I could have sworn, I might be wrong, that when Sheriff Myers was rattling off the dates of your employment, he said you had worked 8 or 10 hours on December 5. Did I hear that wrong or correct? Okay, so you're actually working on that day. Where'd you type this letter on December 5?
At home?
Before you went to work?
No, I think I typed it at home when I got home that evening.
Okay. So this letter would have been typed after working hours on December 5.
I believe, I don't recall exactly when I typed it.
And then you believe you hand-delivered it to Sheriff Myers on the 6th.
I do believe that was when I gave it to him.
And Sheriff Myers said that the job that you took the second time around down there had not been posted or advertised. Does that sound correct to you?
I'm not aware of that.
You didn't see it in the newspaper, for instance.
No, sir, I did not.
You didn't check on the internet and find out he had an opening. How did you know to call him after you got out?
I believe I answered that earlier when you asked it.
You did, I apologize. I don't need to do this again. Thank you. You had said when I was asking you about your resignation letter, Exhibit P3, that you were about to file something with the court?
Yes,
Application or whatever?
I had received information from the court that
Speak up, please.
I received information from the court that my background information had been returned. There's a process you have to follow when applying for sheriff, and that had returned, and that I needed to see the judge to file that information so that it could be sent to, at this time, the DCC.
And it's been marked P7. You recognize P7?
Yes, sir.
And you signed this document? Last page?
Yes, sir.
And you signed it in front of Judge Haas, who I think was standing in for Judge Forciano.
That's correct.
And it indicates that, Judge Haas indicates that it was sworn to before him on 26 November 2013.
Yes, sir.
Did I read that right?
Yes.
Is that wrong date?
No, sir.
And at the top right-hand side, it's stamped by the Clerk of Courts as November 26, 2013.
Yes, sir.
You were still working for Harrison County on November 26, 2013, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
So prior to the date of Exhibit P3, your resignation letter, you had already filed signed and filed in the Court of Common Pleas, Exhibit P7, entitled Application for Candidacy.
Yes, sir.
And so when you testified earlier with reference to your resignation letter that you were going to file an application, you'd already filed it, hadn't you?
No, I was going to file the petition to be considered by the DCC on the 6th. This application is to start, you have to understand the process. This application is to start the process for a background check, FBI, BCI, and all the records in Stark County. And so that slows the process down, if you will. And this application was to start that process. Once that information is received back by the court, then you come and do your final filing with the court. It's either submitted to the DCC in this case, or to the Board of Elections.
When you say in this case, this P7 was related to the second appointment by the DCC?
Yes, sir.
The post-ouster appointment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you read a paragraph that's numbered 1 in P7? Out loud.
I am a candidate for the office of Sheriff, Stark County, Ohio.
So, in the title of this document in bold print, all capital letters, underlined at the top, says what?
Application for candidacy.
So you sign and file an application for candidacy for the office of Stark County Sheriff on November 26, 2013.
Yes, sir.
While you're still working for Harrison County.
You don't realize how much happens when you're not here.
In P3, you say you are a classified employee. What does that mean? P3 looks like this, Mr. Maier. How do you got some government papers in front of you?
Yes.
Objection. Again, I don't see the relevance of this to the issues of B8 and B9. I think the issue is simply whether or not he was a full-time employee of the Harrison County Sheriff's Office, not whether he was classified, unclassified, not whether or not political or applications are 100% accurate or not. The issue before this board, whether or not he meets the requirements of B8, B9, whether he was a full-time employee, he meets the other requirements of B9. This line of questioning is irrelevant to what you have to decide.
First of all,
Let
Mr.
me
Chairman,
question.
if I may respond, Exhibit P3 is not my document, it's his document.
Right.
And in fact, this document, I think is even in your record from those 244 documents of Mr. Maier. So Mr. Rosenberg claims it's not relevant, but his own client gives it to you. But, you know, I didn't pick the document. Mr. Rosenberg and Mr. Maier did. And I think...
I'll give you some leeway as to what you're going to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. In Exhibit P3, you indicate you're a classified employee. Do you mean during your term of employment with Harrison County?
Yes.
And what does this classified employee, what's that mean?
Well, under the code, I was operating as an employee in the classified service.
Which meant you were not allowed to engage in partisan politics.
Objection.
Well, all right, well, I'm sorry, I'll read it for you. As you are aware, I am a classified employee and unable to seek an appointment or election of a political office. And then skipping, I must resign my position to avoid any violation of law. Now, I didn't write that letter, did I?
No.
Okay. What law are you trying to avoid violating?
Objection.
Again, Mr. Chairman, his letter goes to credibility, goes to the sham, and he proffers this letter to the board, but I'm not allowed to ask any questions on such stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't agree with the characterization of the sham, but you can ask a question.
Did I read that right, that you tell the Harrison County Sheriff, I got to resign to avoid any violation of law because I'm a classified employee?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what law are you talking about?
I just, you know, in researching this, I felt that there may be some concern about me being in the classified service and taking a appointed position.
Okay, so you write this letter on the 5th, but you did in fact apply for a partisan appointment to become sheriff via P7.
I did.
No further questions on that. Exhibit P3 or P7. think I'm on P8, does that sound right?
Yes, you are.
I believe this document either came from one of your Supreme Court filings or it came from something you filed with this board. But in any event, do you recognize P8?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the board what this document, I see it consists of 5 pages, what's this document, what's its purpose, what's it do, what's it mean, whatever?
This is the SF 400 that was discussed earlier. In this case, it's SF 400 as an appointment to the Ohio Investigative Unit.
And it's dated July 31, 2008. Top right-hand side, first page. The file stamp.
File stamp is that. That's not the certificate, that's the file stamp.
The director signed it on July 24, 2008, I think. First page on the bottom right.
Yes.
If you could look at, as far as you know, is everything accurate in P8? I'm not going to go through it line by line.
As far as I know.
Objection. I mean, it's obvious to the board that page 2 does not belong as part of this document. Pages 1, 3, 4, and 5 are all 2008. Page 2 is a document dated 2011. It's a little unfair when we all can recognize that page 2 is not part of this document.
Did I ask you if
You asked if
page 2
P8 was accurate.
Yeah. Is the content of the 4 or 5 pages of P8, is any of the content inaccurate? Is a name wrong, a date wrong, a signature forged? Anything wrong to you?
It just appears as if the forms were intermixed, different dates.
Yes, and I apologize, and it does appear that way. But are any of these documents, anything seem to contain any errors as far as you're concerned?
I don't believe so.
And looking at the second and third and fourth pages, looks like it's signed by George D. Maier. Is that your signature?
Not on the second page.
I'm sorry, third, fourth, fifth page.
Yes.
And if you could look at the front page of P8, the box that's marked C, appointment information. Box number 14 indicates current rank as a peace officer. What does it say in there?
Agent.
You're aware, of course, that the statute for the purposes today requires a corporal or above.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that doesn't say corporal or anything above this.
It says agent, which in the Ohio Investigative Unit, everybody's listed as agents.
Is the director listed as an agent as well?
I believe so, yes, sir.
What documents have you submitted to this board to demonstrate, I see your attorney's already referred to ORC 311.01D8B, that you acknowledge you're not qualified under that subsection, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I want to look at this 311.01B8A. What documents have you, and I guess in fairness to you, I'm going to give you, only have one copy, so you don't have to guess. The revised code sections we're talking about, let me show it to Tom. Here's printed. I think, gentlemen on the board, I'm sorry I didn't bring another code section. I referred to it in my client's protest in rather abbreviated fashion. And I know the Supreme Court, in its ouster opinion, referred to at page 7 et sequitur to these code sections verbatim. I apologize, I didn't have the good sense to bring more copies. At any rate, Mr. Maier, I want to look at, I'm just going to abbreviate it instead of giving the whole number. I'm just going to say B8A. Which, Mr. Maier, you have in front of you. I think the fair summary of it is that you're required 4 years prior to the qualification period, during that 4-year period, to be a full-time peace officer. That a fair summary of it.
Well, there's a couple parts to it. Has obtained or held within a 4-year period ending immediately prior to the qualification date a valid peace officer certificate of training. That's the first part of it. And I've had a valid peace officer certificate of training since 1981 with no break in service.
You know, and I think the Supreme Court, as I pointed out in the protest, like it or not, we're all stuck with the Supreme Court's decision, and I believe the Supreme Court found that you were a peace officer.
Yes.
And so that's not an issue in my objection, and I think the board will notice that I said the Supreme Court said that. When they speak, that's the end of the story. So I'm not asking you that question. That's why I limited it to this full-time peace officer. It requires immediately prior to the qualification date, you be a full-time peace officer.
Yes.
Okay. And it doesn't say for how long. It just says within 4 years.
Yes.
Okay. So for that purpose of meeting B8A, you are relying upon your Harrison County employment the second time around.
Yes, sir. In addition to my current employment as a Stark County Sheriff.
Speak up, please.
In addition to my current employment as a Stark County Sheriff, it's this December the 12th.
Okay, now I want to look at 9A, first of all. And that's that code section you have in front of you, Mr. Maier, candidate. What evidence have you submitted to this board in your 244 pages of qualifications that would demonstrate, at least in your opinion, that you have met 9A?
I have submitted to the Board of Elections in my packet information pertaining to my role with the Ohio Department of Public Safety, with position descriptions showing me over as the Assistant Director over the Executive Director of the Department of Ohio Investigative Services, over the Executive Director position at the Colonel of the Highway Patrol, and over the investigative unit of the BMV and others within that agency. I was in the, as submitted, I was in the chain of command and held a peace officer's commission and certificate at the time. I also submitted information related to my duty and tenure with the Massillon City as a safety and service director, which under code is deemed as the director appointee over the police and fire department.
And in your capacity with the Department of Public Safety, is that what they're called?
Yes.
Yes. What rank did you hold?
Director.
You held director for like 2 days.
Well, it was a little longer than that, but I was assistant director.
And you're really, and that's a paramilitary rank in your mind?
I don't even know that. I just know it's in the chain of command for the agency. Keep in mind that the Ohio Investigative Unit is not a uniform unit. They wear soft clothes, sometimes suits, sometimes other clothing to blend into their environment. So it wasn't a uniform structure, so there wasn't rank structure in place such as you had mentioned in paramilitary. But there was a rank structure in place, and there were at the lowest level field agents, the next level assistant agents in charge, the next level agents in charge, then above them was deputy directors. Above the deputy directors was the director, and the executive director, and above the executive director was the assistant director of the Department of Public Safety, which was my position.
Okay, so it's your assertion that your job with the Department of Public Safety was the equivalent of the rank of corporal or above?
Absolutely.
And because, as I'm sure you're aware, the qualification date for today for the election was moved up a year from the qualification date that was at issue for your second appointment.
Yes, sir.
And I'm presuming you read my client's protest.
I did.
And I presume you noticed that even if the board should give you this rank status as you're arguing, you're short 2 years.
I believe so.
Well, I guess the board could do the arithmetic, that won't become argumentative. Let's assume, I didn't make my question clear enough, I apologize. When you look at the qualification date being advanced a year from what it was before the DCC the last time, my arithmetic showed that you were just shy with the Director of Public Safety of 2 years, even if you're considered to have rank of corporal or above for supervisory purposes. Do you dispute that?
I do.
Arithmetic wrong?
I don't dispute you do your arithmetic wrong. I don't know how you do your arithmetic. I dispute that I do not meet that qualification. I've been serving as the Starr County Sheriff,
No, I
which is the
understand
Chief
that.
Executive of the Starr County Sheriff's Office
No, I
since
understand that.
December the 12th.
I understand that, but that's not my question.
Objection. You should allow the witness to finish his answer.
Yeah, but the answer needs to be responsive. I'm asking him about the directorship, and now he's talking about sheriff.
No, he asked him how he met.
No, you asked how he met the requirement.
No, I asked him about the 2 years. Do you disagree in my client's brief as to the director job? Only that, not sheriff, not Hartville Police in 1981, none of that.
I have not.
Just as to that directorship, do you dispute the arithmetic that you did not meet 2 years
I think he was.
while you were with the department?
He was attempting to
Public
answer.
safety.
I do not necessarily dispute the assertion of your client, although I will say that it's not taken in its totality for the purposes of this hearing.
No, and I understand you want to add after that, and that's your right to try that. I'm trying to focus in on when you were with the Department of Public Safety, you're arguing that service met 9A, at least, maybe not on the calendar, but that meant this corporal or above supervisory service, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, my next question is, only with reference to the Department of Public Safety, did you meet the 2 years under 9A?
not sure I know how to answer the question. You're asking me if I meet 9A, but you're only asking me to talk about part of my experience.
Yeah, but see, I have a right to ask the question, and my question
And I'm going to
is
answer
limited
whatever
to-
question you ask.
And my question is limited to Department of Public Safety. I understand you want to argue, yeah, but that's not the whole picture, and you'll certainly free to do that. If I don't ask the question, I'm sure Mr. Rosenberg will. I'm trying to ask you, in my client's protest, she asserts, for purposes of 9A, you were just shy of 2 years.
She did assert that.
Or do you think that's wrong? Only Department of
I
Public
don't know
Safety.
that I totally agree with that.
Okay, how much time did you have under this 9A with Department of Public Safety?
You have the time there.
Well, you have it. You filed it with the board.
Objection.
Well, it's a pretty darn important issue. This 2 years is part of the statute. Just trying to get him to admit the
May I
obvious.
state my objection?
Sure.
We are taking more time than is necessary to deal with issues. It is unequivocal that Sheriff Maier spent 23 months at the Ohio Department of Public Safety.
Thank you. That's all I need.
If I may
question.
finish, sir, without interruption, because I don't interrupt him. It is unequivocal that Sheriff Maier spent 23 months at the Ohio Department of Public Safety. There is no testimony contrary. The issue before this board is whether he meets the 2-year requirement of 9A. What Sheriff Maier contends is that his current position as Stark County Sheriff.
Objection. He's testifying for Sheriff Maier. He's made his objection. I understand.
We can do this along so much quicker. What Sheriff Maier contends is that his current position as Stark County Sheriff, that he has been in office from December to the qualification date in February, eliminates the gap and gets him over the 2 years. The issue before this board is simply going to be whether or not 9A requires 2 years of continuous service, or you can take 23 months and add 2 months and get to 25. That's the issue. We don't need a lot of questioning about how long he was in various positions. It's in the documents and it's before us. We can move this along a lot quicker.
Mr. Rosenberg, we understand the issue, and we do understand the question, and even though it's a very narrow question with respect to the ODP or OIC, we understand what Mr. Conley is trying to achieve. It's still going to be a matter for us to consider based on the evidence. So, we may proceed.
Well, I'm taking his admission on behalf of his client when he said 23 months as opposed to 24 months.
We understand.
So I don't need to beat that dead horse. I just couldn't get Mr. Maier to say it. But thank you, Tom. It's helpful. By the way, Mr. Chairman, it is not the only issue of whether 2 years are simultaneous or not. Back-to-back, as I've argued in the protest, is also an issue as to whether or not the service with the Department of Public Safety is at the rank of corporal.
We understand.
So Mr. Rosenberg missed, I'm sure he did it inadvertently, but he misstated the issue that's before this board. Let's get down to 9B if you could, Mr. Maier. Have you submitted, and I realize this is an alternative to 9A. The Supreme Court, as I pointed out to the board, said you don't need to meet both, you need to meet one. Before Mr. Rosenberg jumps up and says, I'm trying to say the contrary, I understand it's an either or. 9B, have you submitted anything to this board, Mr. Maier, that would indicate you meet the requirement of 9B?
I have, yes.
And what would that be?
A letter from Stark State College.
A letter or an affidavit? Did you mean a letter?
I think there was a letter in the packet, yes.
Now, if you could look at the packet that your counsel had brought with that one with the tabs on it. I think it is the letter you're talking about what's been marked as L as in Larry. Yes, sir. And you were saying this letter means that you meet, and I realize maybe it goes with Exhibit M as well. There's a hard to read transcript there. Are you submitting to this board that Exhibit L is evidence of you meeting 9B?
Yes, sir.
Because you're on that section that.
Oh, but my new document is not.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for the assistance. Take a minute to scratch out that old exhibit number. You, of course, have seen P9 before because it's in your forewarning case, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this Brenda Vogley, is that the same person that wrote the letter we just talked about?
Yes.
CL?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you read the last of her numbered paragraphs, paragraph 12, out loud for the panel, please?
At the conclusion of the prior learning assessment, Maier received a stark transcript, Exhibit 6 of this affidavit. The affidavit is true and accurate copy of Maier's transcript. The transcript represents what Stark will accept as transfer credits. As of the date of this affidavit, Maier has not earned any credit in Stark's statement.
Since the date of this affidavit that's filed with the Supreme Court, it's dated 27 March 2013, have you earned any credit at Stark as referred to in paragraph 12?
No, sir.
And you nonetheless contend that you meet the educational requirements?
Yes, sir.
Sir Conley, do you have Exhibit 6, or is that not necessary?
Well, I have what?
Exhibit 6 is mentioned in paragraph 12.
Her exhibits were 30 or 40 pages, and so when I submitted it to your board, maybe Mr. Maier submitted the entirety of it, I don't know. I indicated without exhibits, because quite frankly, I think paragraph 12 is the end of the story. The board may disagree, and I'm sure Mr. Rosen.
It's the end of the affidavit, but it talks about Exhibit 6, which we don't have, so I was...
Well, there's more than, yeah, there's exhibit 1 through 6 indicated in there. I think I can ask Mr. Maier.
It's the one that's really difficult to read.
I think the transcript that you're talking about, Mr. Chairman, is exhibit M.
Yes.
CM.
This is different. That's in effect.
Thank you.
And perhaps I can clear it up by simply asking Mr. Maier, if you look at exhibit CM, looks like this, Mr. Maier.
Yes.
Is that the transcript from Stark State College?
Yes.
I see it says date issued 1/15/2013. Top right-hand side.
Yes.
And you may not recall, and I don't want to get another objection from Mr. Rosenberg, but To your knowledge, is Exhibit M the transcript that's referred to in paragraph 12 of Ms. Logley's affidavit, P9?
It may be, yes.
Well, are you aware of more than one transcript from Stark State Department?
This is probably it. I don't know for sure because I don't have that with me, but I would say this is it.
Have you ever seen more than one?
No, sir.